Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the September 10th, 2018 meeting of the Development and Governmental Relations Subcommittee to the Holyoke City Council. I am the chairman. With us is Councilor Josie Valentin, Councilor Mike Sullivan, Councilor Peter Tallman on the committee. Also in chambers is Councilor Joe McGivern. And we're waiting for our guests to come, but at this point, I think we can get a motion to take item 1 off the table.
Take item number 1 off the table, previous meeting minutes.
On the motion to take number 1 off the table, which is a review of the previous meeting minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. We received these this afternoon. I made 2 just very small changes. One, I added an "and" in there because of a typo, and then Rob Levesque's name was misspelled. Oh, yeah. So Ryan left out an S, but otherwise, in my opinion, he captured the gist of the meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes with the corrections specified.
Second.
On the motion to approve the minutes with the 2 very small corrections, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you for that. Perfect timing. So, if I could get a motion to take number 2 off the table.
Motion to take item number 2 off the table for discussion.
Second.
On the motion to take number 2 off the table, number 2 is, on the motion to take number 2 off the table, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
Could we take 2 and 3 as a package?
Motion to amend and take, suspend rules, take number 2 and 3 as a
Second that.
package. On that motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. On that motion, welcome, guys. Item number 2, filed by Mike, I signed on to it. Committee be formed to study the future of and make recommendations on the future use of Whiting Reservoir. In excess of $1.5 million in repairs and upgrades to the dam and spillway are needed, according to Councilor Sullivan, which I'm sure he'll support that. The state will soon order that the water level be drawn down to 6 feet. This will expose acres of new shoreline and adversely affect the appearance of the area. Committee should include a member of the Water and Conservation Commission as OPED stakeholders and City Councilor. Item number 3 is by Councilor Sullivan that the water commissioners and department head meet with the council to discuss and update issues regarding Whiting Reservoir and Ashley Reservoir and tax abatements. And with us tonight are Dave, your title manager? Manager of the Holyoke Waterworks, David Conti. Dave, when did you start the Waterworks? 1988. Okay, and make sure your mic's on. And with us also is long-term Commissioner Mark Nadorf. Mark, when did you start as a commissioner? 1990. 1990. Okay, so that's just important history. I just want to get that in front of us. So, thank you for having us. Well, thanks, and make sure your mic's on. Mark, if you would.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, it's always great to have a city council appointee with us. We really appreciate that. Councilor Sullivan, floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you. I met with the commissioners and the manager a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that's going to be coming before us also on Wednesday with finance, but We've got the Whiting Reservoir, which you guys can correct me if I'm off somewhat on the dates and stuff, but I believe no water's been drawn out of it for 24 years now, and it appears that there's not much call for it, probably for as much as the next 50 or more years to ever have it back online again. Now we're faced with also a problem of having to do some state-ordered work on the place. And I just think we could do a lot better than to spend that kind of money to have something just sit in reserve idly for 50 years when it could be enjoyed for recreation, or it could be a possible source of revenue for the city in the meantime if we're going to invest that kind of money in it. So for the committee, and why don't we, could we pass one over to Joe too, so he's got one? and just to correct what we said before, it hasn't been, the water hasn't been drawn down to 6 feet, it's been drawn down by 6 feet, as I understand it. So I've supplied everybody with some pictures of what it looks like now drawn down, which is not what people are used to seeing at all in the first picture. The second picture shows the spillway, which as I understand it, is a major part of the problem, along with the dam, the earthing dam that the state's going to require well in excess of $1 million, if not closer to $2 million worth of repair work and upgrade to. Right now, that seems to me besides what I said previously, a heck of a lot of money to spend and not be able to have any use at all of it. No fishing, no recreational activities, no nothing. So my thoughts were to get a study group together and see what ideas we could come up with. To me, the possibilities are limitless. Anything from having people come in from UMass to hold classes there, trying to do something really grandiose, tie it together with the Boys Club property. The former Mount Tom ski area could be an ideal location for some of those activities. Have it open for fishing, for canoeing, possibly for water bottling on a franchise basis, zip lining, whatever else anybody else could come up with, what we could attract to it, rather than just have it sit idle and spend this kind of money on it. So.
So, gentlemen,
You want us to take?
yeah, so I do apologize. They're having a cheerleader practice upstairs for I mean, they had to be third and fourth, fifth graders, maybe.
Was there any food coming?
No, so I know people at home are wondering what we're looking at, and it was, the auditorium is directly above us, and when they're bounced up, and, I mean, you hate to curtail it, but it's a bit distracting, so I'm sorry I missed the beginning of that, but.
So, before David's got some hard facts for you, but just before we go there, let me start by saying, first of all, taking a reservoir offline is not as easy as one might think. There's a long process that the state makes us go through. They really don't like to take reservoirs offline. But let me just say this: since I've been on the board, and I have been here a couple of years, and I think I told this to Mike while he was down to visiting. There's been it seems like every couple of years somebody comes up with a good idea or an idea that they want to, what they want to do with the reservoir because it hasn't been acted as drinking water. So it has been proposed to us, or at least to me, that we took a look at it for high-income housing, to sell it off and get some tax revenue to the city that way by one group. And then another former councilor suggested that we do low-income housing up there. And then, there have been people who have suggested that we do turn it into a racetrack for horses and paddle boats like Wood Park, and a long series of other kinds of discussions or proposals. Mike, your ideas are, I think, as vibrant as certainly any of the others I've heard. But I started by saying that it's not an easy thing to decommission a reservoir, and that's one of the first things we have to look into if that's the way we're going to go. But David's got some hard facts for you, so let him talk about those.
So you just with regards to that reservoir, it was taken offline in '97 when we supplied the city from the water at the Tyke Harmony Reservoir. That reservoir is a high dam classification, significant high hazard. And because of its classification, it has to be inspected by a registered professional engineer every 2 years. So we have an inspection coming up this October. And one of the major items that's been noted in that inspection report is the capacity of the spillway. In its current state, in the event of a probable maximum storm, that would overtopple the dam by 3/4 of a foot, which would mean probable failure of the dam, loss of life, and a significant amount of damage to 91. So that's one of the reasons why we're putting more emphasis on looking at repairing or upgrading that spillway to prevent that from happening. Now, all the other spillways on all the other reservoirs meet that half PMF. So this is the last of the reservoirs that needs to have this addressed. So there are other deficiencies noted, but again, the Department of Environmental Management, Office of Dam Safety, receives these reports every 2 years, and they haven't really enforced the recommendations of the engineer, but there's going to come a point in time where they are going to, and we're going to be forced to fix it. Now, the cost to repair that spillway is in the order of $2 million. That's the estimate. We're going to be coming before the Finance Committee in a couple of days, and we're going to talk about that project along with others which we consider significant projects or are high recommendation or high priority projects that the City Council should take a look at approving funding for in the upcoming years. I mean, we want to address a lot of these deficiencies that have been put on hold in the system because the amount of money that was expended on the bond project, the $19 million to build the filtration plant, the pipeline, all the tanks. Now that that bond has matured, there's a lot of issues that have been placed on the sidelines, and now we'd like to address those moving forward. So that's what's going to be coming up. But as far as that reservoir is concerned, right now, it's not in use. It can be put in use in a day's notice. All the piping is there. It's still connected to the system. And in the event of an emergency, if there was a loss of water for whatever reason, we had to put that reservoir back in step, we could do that within a day. But it's still classified as a drinking water source, and to declassify it would be significantly difficult. And as far as developmental purposes, there's a lot of talk about, selling off land. A lot of that land is wetlands. There's endangered species out there. There's rare plant habitat out there. That's all been documented through the Department of Wildlife and other endangered species organizations. So to look at developing that, it would have to be any lands that are downstream of that reservoir or not within the watershed. And again, you're talking about lands that are downstream of that spillway and that dam. So those are a lot of things that should be considered.
So,
No, go ahead, Mike, get the floor.
so the first concern, Mark, you mentioned it's a difficult process, all right? But it's the state that's putting it to us to maintain it as a reservoir, all right? And, in my mind, which is more difficult, just going through a difficult process or spending $2 million? If we're going to spend the two, and I'll be back to my earlier thing, it would still be available as a reservoir. It would be easy to curtail activities 20 years from now or 30 years from now if we had a use for that reservoir. But as I understood it, talk with the commission, there wasn't much chance of that being needed or coming back online anytime in the next 50 years. Did I miss something there? Or?
Well, first of all, the state's really not forcing us to maintain it as a reservoir. It is a reservoir, and decommissioning it is a difficult process, as David said. Not that it can't be done. It just it's big. It's a bigger project than one might think at first glance. But regardless of whether we maintain it as a a reservoir for drinking water or not, the spillway needs to be repaired. So that $2 million is an expense that, just from a public safety point of view, we're going to end up having to do sooner or later. And we would prefer to, I think, be a little more aggressive and do it on our terms rather than do it on the state's terms.
All right, well,
They have a tendency to make us spend money when we don't have it, as opposed to right now, where, as David said, and as you all know, because most of you have agreed to the repairs that we've been doing for years. So the big $23 million pipeline and all of that stuff, the CT facility, all of that's paid for. You know, there's been some other improvements, this new light bulb project that we put in, secondary disinfection, that's completed. So the water department is again, you know, and we've always been in pretty good condition. But right now there's not a lot of debt, and we'd really like to, because of all the debt we've had before and the projects, there's a lot of projects that we've put off. There's a lot of just basic infrastructure stuff, pipelines, neighborhoods that need repair, neighborhoods that need improvements. You know, we've been doing a lot of Band-Aid work to make sure that everybody has clean water, and there are some areas that if we don't get to them soon, you know, near future, you know, it's gonna become very problematic. But
now, we get that part, but as far as the, and what needs to be done, we'll get into that Wednesday night, I'm sure pretty heavy, and some people might be shocked by those numbers, but, for example, Quabbin Reservoir is still a reservoir, yet boating is allowed on Quabbin Reservoir, fishing is allowed on Quabbin Reservoir, they have all kinds of events out there. What is it about Quabbin that they can have recreational activities, but we can't do it?
a great question, Mike. The answer is very simple. It just has to do with the size of the reservoir. There's so much water there that you know, the kind of activities that they allow just don't have major impact. They are also not, the people at Quabbin are not responsible for the quality at the users, at the end user. You know, most of the water that comes out of Quabbin goes east towards Boston and then down south towards the Cape. Each town that takes water from the reservoir then has to treat it. So it's they're not under the same kind of restrictions that we are in our reservoirs, and what we were under with Whiting Street. Now, when you talk about just future uses, it's very unlikely that Holyoke will ever use that as drinking water again. I mean, to be very frank, it's not in terms of the amount of water we use, it's not a huge source. It's about 1.5 million gallons a day, which sounds like a lot, but certainly enough to do your lawn. But it's really not a lot of water when we compare it to some of the other reservoirs, and not just ours, but other communities. So that's its first problem. But the places that it could be used are, for example, it could go over. East Hampton is showing problems with their water. It is a potential source of revenue for us if we could pump it up the hill and then down to them. Northampton has real problems up in Leeds with their reservoirs. So there's a possibility that Northampton could use that water, and there's been a long-term conversation with Sal Hadley about supplying water to them, and that could be taken with a pipeline across under the river. to do that. So the options that are available, potentially available for that as drinking water are still very viable. Depends what happens in the future, and I don't know how good your crystal ball is. I've given up on mine.
Well, no, again, I'm just concerned about the fact that we would be spending $2 million or more just for the remote possibility that East Hampton or Northampton may someday possibly want to purchase some water from us. I've been told by one of the commissioners over in South Hadley that they wouldn't, that they actually draw out a Quabbin and sit on a tremendous aquifer over there in the other fire district. So,
Well, two things. First of all, it's not a question of wanting to fix that dam. I mean, that has to be done for public safety reasons.
I get that, but we're going to spend $2 million on it.
That's what it costs. I mean, it's not just that, that's what it costs. Whether somebody drinks water from it or they don't, it still has to be, repair has to be done, unless you want to talk about draining the reservoir and giving up the resource totally. And, you know, that's the same as decommissioning, and the process is, again, not an easy thing to do.
Well, just on that.
But I will.
Well, Mark, just on that comment, Councilor Sullivan's order does contemplate, not, well, I'll just read it. It says the state will soon order that the water level be drawn down 6 feet. So.
Well, we do that on a regular basis, just to protect the
Well,
land anyways. The state just wants them have it be safe. What we fear is they're gonna force us to do the repair work. They're not, you know, at this point, they're not forcing us to reduce the water.
Right, so I mean, so let me just interject here. So, as Councilor Sullivan, as you said a couple of times, $2 million estimate. So we know it's probably going to be north of that because estimates are usually conservative. So it'll probably be north of that. So is there a cost between draining it completely? What's the and starting this process? That, I mean, when you sat down, Mark, you rightly talked about how similar orders from similar bodies have, similar counselors have kind of brought this up year after year. Since I've been on this board, but even before that, I've heard similar comments from, among others, members of the Waterworks Commission, that there's a market for Holyoke water. Westfield is the most recent example, and that fizzled. But I've heard the same thing about East Hampton. Now, Northampton's a new one. I hadn't heard Northampton and Leeds be a possibility, but we've been here about South Hadley since the day I walked through that door.
The day I've been on the commission.
Right. So, so these are, at some point, I think we as a city, not just us that are sitting here, we really should make a decision. I mean, are you going to use it for drinking water? Probably not. If you're not going to use it for drinking water,
I agree.
Why do we even have a source? Why? I mean, it's a pretty area, but there's got to be something better. If we're not going to use it for 50 years, we'd said that, so that's our lifetimes. Why can't we start the process, at least start the process of decommissioning?
Look, if you guys want to turn it into a park, it's certainly.
I don't know what I want to turn it into.
Well, I'm just saying, it's certainly an option.
Well, that's.
And again, I start the comment by saying it's not easy to decommission the reservoir, but anything can be.
No, I heard you say that, but we don't. I want Mr. Conti, because he knows what. And happy anniversary too, by the way, Dave. 30 years on the job. That's pretty good. But so, Mr. Conti, you really have the institutional knowledge. So go ahead.
Well, if you drain the reservoir, the state's not going to allow you to drain the reservoir unless you breach the dam. We went through the situation when they drained the White Reservoir up in Southampton or West Hampton area back in 1960. We drained it, and then the state was forcing us to breach the dam. And what's involved in breaching the dam is now you're involved in doing studies, impacts to downstream areas, the fish, the wildlife, the terrain, because when you breach that dam, now you have a full flow of water every time it rains, which is a situation or a condition that hasn't existed in 75, 100 years. So there's all types of studies that are involved before you can even breach it. But you've got to, if you're going to drain the reservoir, the state's going to make you take the dam structure down. It's going to be millions and millions of dollars. You're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on studies to determine impacts downstream of that, and then mitigating measures to address those impacts. So draining the reservoir is not necessarily going to be an inexpensive solution. It's going to be a costly solution.
Oh, you know, I had a strong feeling you were gonna say that. I didn't think this is gonna be a $2 million savings.
No, I mean,
But I'm wondering, Dave, and that's why, I mean, first of all, thanks for, I mean, I was writing these facts down that Mark and you guys you were saying. I mean, it's so interesting learning about it. I mean, I can tell you go to the meetings, and you, obviously, Mark, I read all the minutes, and whoever there's a butcher does the minutes, and you sign off on. I think you might do the minutes, Dave. They're really wonderful. You almost feel like you're in the room, so it's really impressive. But yes, we know it's going to be costly, but we also know it's costly to repair a dam that's never going to have a use. I mean, at some point we should make. I don't know. It's my humble just to make the decision to.
Well, it's not to say that I mean, the body of water, whether once it's been repaired, certainly can be used for other activities. I mean, for example, we allow at that reservoir, we allow fishing derbies if somebody wants to run one. There's criteria for them to pull it off. We certainly allow people to walk and to exercise around the reservoir. We encourage people to go up and enjoy the area. There's no question about that. So, you know, it's not that and Mike's got some good ideas, and we talked about those. It's not to say you can't add those to the current condition, just it all is going to require some kind of permits and acceptance by the state and, you know, acknowledgments. They don't let you do in those areas, they don't let you do anything without a stamp here and an approval there and that kind of
Well,
stuff.
and you're obviously both you and your brother to be commended for being stewards of such a beautiful. I mean, we're so lucky to have it. I think if I read the spirit of this order, it's we want to. I don't know. I'm not sure if we have to make it more tight, but to allow more use up there, whether it's draining it or whether it's keeping it as it is, but having more activity there. So it just. I mean, that's really almost like one of the crown jewels of the city. And when you see when you
It's not to say we can't do that. I mean, certainly we can increase the amount of activities. It's just a question of fulfilling the state requirements and the board's requirements. I mean, for example, we require that there's somebody to pick up the trash, require that there's a porta potty, at least one, if not more, depends how big the crowd's going to be, and we require some policing if there's going to be a lot of activity on a single day. So those are the three major criteria that we use. And, you know, but if you wanted to change it into the kind of things that Mike are talking about, it's just a question of making sure that there are systems in place and there are mostly safety issues that are being taken care of so that if there's any activity, people can't get hurt. It's all public safety business, certainly at that reservoir. I mean, at the other reservoirs, we're more concerned about the quality of the water because it, in fact, is still being used as drinking water. At Whiting Street, you know, the opportunity to open that up to more use is certainly available to the city, and it wouldn't. I mean, it certainly wouldn't bother me. It just, again, the criteria for what's got to be done in order to allow that is really what we would have to be concerned about, along with the state. I mean, we need their approvals too.
So, to the heart of the question then, what would be the best way to go about this then, Mark? Would it be to form a committee comprised, as I said, of, some various people, or just let the water department bring some people in and come, the water commissioners try and move
I
it.
think David hit on the nose. I mean, there'd have to be some kind of study done. It's not just a matter of putting a bunch of people together and putting some ideas together. I think the ideas have been floated, again, as I said, for years. There've been different kinds of ideas floated.
Well,
But we've never really moved forward. I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, hold on, Council, did you, one sec, Joe.
Yeah, my only concern is every time we put a study group together, it costs the city $50,000. Do we have the people on board through our own community, our conservation people, our economic planning, the water commission itself?
I see it more as a legal study as opposed to an organizational group. Somebody's got to go study the law and the state requirements. And once you have a handle on that, then you can start to talk about what kind of activities you could have. But until you know the process that the state's going to make us go through, and not just us, I mean the city and everybody's going to have to sign on. Our state legislators, the mayor, you guys, the conservation. I mean, if there's a group out there, they're gonna have their say in this, and that's a good thing, I think. I mean, you don't want to do it. You don't want anybody to do it alone.
Councilman McGivern.
Thank you. David or Mark, what is the water source? that
Excuse me,
feeds-
counsel, if I could have 30 seconds, please. I just wanted to explain the noise upstairs.
Oh,
We know, yeah.
well, there's we'll just suspend for a sec,
The
Joe.
interruption, I hate to interrupt.
Yeah,
the
no, go ahead.
My name's Adam Grabowski. I'm a resident of Holyoke. Upstairs is the cheerleading team of the Pop Warner Football League. For the past few weeks, their practices have been either heated out or rained out. I called the mayor's office this morning, said, hey, the Pop Warner cheerleader team is looking for a place to practice. Would up there be fine? I just got here, but I got a call from the group. There's a problem with the noise and the stomping. Is that correct, or?
Well, you know what, and I appreciate you coming down, so, just for anybody at home, I don't think his mic was on. There's a lot of activity going on above us in the old City Hall auditorium, and I went up and just humbly asked them to just curtail it, and since I've been up there, they've been great. So I
Practice
think,
is over around 7:30, 7:45.
I really appreciate
They've
that.
resumed, if that's all right, because we're almost done.
Great.
I can't say enough about what it does for these girls and how important it is for the city of Holyoke. So I appreciate you working with them a lot.
And we are. So we appreciate you coming down, okay?
Thank you, everybody. Forgive the interruption.
Thanks so much. Councilman McGivern.
Thank you. What is the source of water for this reservoir?
Whiting Street Reservoir, it's the drainage area around it, the mountain area, the drainage
Okay, so
area.
it's rainwater,
Yes, yeah, surface water.
all surface water.
It's
And Mark, you said about going under the river. Did we not ask the state when they rebuilt the Muller Bridge to put a pipe under it? Or not the Muller Bridge, but one of the bridges?
Correct. But that doesn't connect to the Whiting Street. That connects to Ashley and to the other sources of water. And the way it sits right now is that Holyoke when the bridge was built and the construction around the rotary, we built a pipeline that goes right to the edge of the bridge.
Yeah.
When South Hadley did their repairs, they built a pipeline that goes right to the edge of the bridge, but there is no pipe that runs under the bridge.
So if South Hadley were to change their mind and look to buy water from the Holyoke Water Department, we don't need this reservoir for them. We could use Tycomedy and pipe it right in.
That's correct.
Because we have plenty of water in
Hadley would be
Tycomedy itself.
more likely than South Hadley.
Okay. Now, we may not be able to do that for East Hampton as easily, but we can do it for South Hadley. So the likelihood of anyone buying water out of this reservoir is even less than what we think.
It's not high, it's not a high, it certainly, I would agree with what you just said. It's
Okay.
not,
So,
it's not a likely outcome.
My humble opinion, and I understand the safety issue with the spillway and the dam, and and all the issues, but there's also other maintenance requirements for this. It's a cost on the users of the Hoyoke Waterworks. And if we don't come up with a plan, we're not doing our jobs. You know, we've talked about this for years. We talked about developing, not on the reservoir, but near the reservoir. We've talked about the golf course. One thing we haven't talked about is selling it. You know, and that would be a possibility with the right investors. But that's not my decision to make, or any of our decisions here to make, you know, unilateral. We need, and I think Mike's order hits the point, is we need to get everybody together and have a real discussion about what we should be planning for the next 5 to 10 years, so that we have a vision, a goal to do something with this. You know, we can all express our opinions, but if we don't start putting in, part of it, I agree with you, is legal. Although I think the person that's more knowledgeable than any attorney I know is sitting next to you. And before we lose him to that, you know, 30 years means another magical number is coming from Mr. Conti, and I'm not quite going to discuss that this evening, but we don't want to lose him, you know, too soon. Take advantage of him.
Great.
And then come up with something that, you know, may not be any of us, but may not be any of the current 30-year water commissioners, but something that we who've seen this for the last 30 years can outline, you know, a vision, or outline a goal or options that we could use this for to offset the cost of maintaining it. It served its purpose, was expensive because we had to pump water out of there, unlike everything else that we have. You know, we're not going to pay to pump again. So I think it's time that we put a group together and just come up with something everybody can agree upon, including maybe a couple public hearings. You know,
I've certainly, as I said, there's a lot of opportunity, certainly some opportunity there. You know, what the long-term, short-term goals, I mean, short-term, the dam has to be repaired. Long-term, where we go with it is up for a lot of discussion.
And
Mark,
you know,
just pull the mic closer to you. I know you're a leaner
sorry.
like me. Just pull the mic closer.
So all I was saying is that short-term, the dam needs to be repaired. Long-term, what happens to that reservoir is absolutely up for discussion. There's no question about it.
And I'm also suggesting when you look at who pays for it, it doesn't necessarily have to be just the water users. There may be ways to offset that, not selling the whole thing, but offset by selling some of it and developing some of it, and some of Mike's ideas about passive recreation. You know, if we get the right investors, we could do this and it would be a win-win for everybody. You know, get it off the, liability of the water department having to maintain it and now having to do take care of the dam and the spillway. But I think it's time to take a serious look at it and come up with a plan.
I'd certainly be on board with that. I don't have a problem. You know, again, it's because it's not being used as drinking water. You know, all of my objections that would normally come about it are really not there. I mean, I'm open to suggestions and willing to listen to anybody that's got some good ideas. I just know up front that it's going to take a lot of work in terms of the study and what's got to happen and figure out how to do it. But and then where we're going to go and trying to get some kind of consensus on that is, I don't think, going to be an easy thing to do.
But it won't hurt to try.
No, I'm with you on that.
Councilor Sullivan?
Thanks for coming down, Mark and David. And I think this beginning discussion is important to see the future use of the reservoirs. And I understand. I've been up there and all the other reservoirs and the work that's been done up in the area. And David, you brought up something tonight. I didn't realize that everybody says this water is never going to be used. It can't be used. But you said within one day you can turn it on. The pipes are there. I never knew that. I just thought, what, it's shut down, it's down. And Mark, you stated about the future use recreation and people can utilize that. And I know they go up there, they walk, they run. You can do fishing with permits, certain regulations with the state that have to have it. I think that's important. And maybe that's something we can look at to utilize that more, just sitting up there. For the future for people, the youth groups or whatever, to get up there, have fishing tournaments or or something up there. I don't know about boating or whatever, but, you know, to utilize that pristine area up there is very important, I think. And I think the study is important, as you stated, could be costly. You know, get somebody that's knowledgeable and attorney, and it's not just us sitting around here and somebody from the Waterworks Conservation discussing, although that can happen, to give us like a guideline, sort of like what we did with the master plan in the city back, you know, in the 80s, to look at what we're going to do in the future with this water. But it is definitely, we do have, you know, the resources, the water resources that a lot of communities don't have. And I think that your job, you know, in the water department and the commissioners is to protect those resources, you know, and that's what it's all about. But I think it's important to look, you know, 5, 10, 20 years down the road and see how can we make this water more usable for the recreation possibly. And I know you're open to that, and the other commissioners are. But as David said about all the regulations, the conservation people, the endangered species, we just went through that down at Holyoke Community College for that road. Would it take 10, 12 years before we could build that road because of the endangered species? So that's something that, you know, with that area, you know, with the endangered species and the wildlife and everything up there, you can't just go up there and bulldoze through it. It's just not that easy. I understand that, and I think most of us do too. So, but I would love to see that be utilized more with proper restrictions for the youth of the
It's a
city.
beautiful space.
It is a beautiful area.
There's
Yeah.
no question.
Yeah, thank you.
There's no question at all. It's gorgeous.
Just want to remind you that they're not creating new sources of water supplies. You can't build a reservoir in today's day and age. And I know this committee says it's highly unlikely that this reservoir will ever be used, but look at the way the standards are going, the drinking water standards. Look at the new standards for groundwater sources. Look at some of the neighboring communities, the problems that they're having with contamination. Don't think that this reservoir may not play a role in the future, maybe 25, 50 years down the road, when Barnes Aquifer or Westfield's water sources dry up, or they have contamination problems. They're testing in parts per billion now. Pretty soon that number is going to get higher and higher. Look at our standards. Look at what's happening to us. So I'm just saying, keep an open mind that this reservoir may be used for some purpose in the future. So I think that draining that would be a big mistake.
And, Mike? Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that. I'm, you know, that could be a long shot, last resort of financial constraint kind of picture. I want to see it, you know, preserved and used for some activities and possibly become revenue producing while we keep it in reserve for the next 50 years. It'd be, as you said, it'd be a lot easier 50 years from now or 100 years to now to say, okay, you got to stop fishing. But to not do anything up there for 50 or 100 years except maintain it as is, I don't think is a wise use of our resources.
Okay, so I think what I heard was some very incremental movement has to take place, which we have to get some kind of a understand the legal parameters around this. Now, would it make sense for us to file an order to have our law department do it? Do we need some? I presume they would need somebody with a lot more technical expertise than what we have in house and what any law department would have in house. No slight to our law department. And so where would we go for that technical expertise? And then as to the heart of this order, putting together a committee, I think we can walk and chew gum on this, gentlemen. In other words, I think we should start to formulate ideas about who should be on a committee, and then at the same time we can find out how we can get our arms around the legal aspects of that. Does that make sense, Mike?
Very much.
Okay. Does that make some sort of sense, gentlemen? Okay. So I think what I'd like to, well, it's your order, but I'd like to move this along and have it, we'll understand if it's complied with, but then we'll have to have a follow-up orders relative to the legal aspect And, you know, Mike, we can file that together for the next meeting, and just, we can consult with Don and Aaron on this as well, and probably Congressman Neal and who's in Hamp? McGovern, Congressman McGovern, I couldn't think of his name.
Yeah.
So, and see what kind of resources are available for, I mean, I would say, I don't know where they are, but I would hope that there be something for this, and maybe this process is already spelled out somewhere, but.
That would be the first thing that someone should look at, is to see if there's been other reservoirs that have been taken offline or other activities have happened to it. If there's a process in place, that would be the best. My guess is that the DEP is gonna create a whole new process that.
Fine.
That's just
you know,
my
good-
guess.
Good for them, but, you know, you can't
But
you
there's
can't
no
hamstring the whole
reason you
city,
can't
'cause-
move forward.
Right.
You know, you just gotta ask a lot of questions.
Right, and
And that would be
so,
one of the first places to talk.
so we'll be taking a vote this year, relative to what's happening at the log cabin, and more likely than not deeding over about 50 acres of land that abuts the upper parking lot to the log cabin to the Department of Environmental Management, so they can protect their endangered species. And we've already taken several other votes in this body relative to the other side of Route 141, when Councilor Alexander was on this board, deeding over property to environmental management. So this city's been more than helpful to environmentalists and environmental organizations. I would hope that they would, I mean, listen, this is an asset. We can't be hamstrung forever, and so I would hope that they'd have some kind of a willingness to work with us,
Somebody's just gotta look into it.
although I doubt it, but.
I don't know what kind of activities they allow. I mean, they own half of that mountain.
Yeah.
The other
Yeah, but they don't
side- the other
allow
side
them,
of the
Mark.
road,
And so the city has a deed restriction right now on 50 acres that abut that, and boy, the DEP wants environmental manager, they want it. Well, the only way they're gonna get it is to come to this body, and it's in this committee right now. So it's right in that jacket. So let's try to work together. Council Tallman.
Yeah, I know we put items 2 and 3 together, so I was just concerned about the Ashley, update on Ashley Reservoir, and then what you stated, the abatements, tax abatements, because before we have this complied with.
Yeah, well, I filed these back in February, and as far as I'm concerned, the Ashley ones have been resolved through ordinance. We just, the Whiting one came in the second one that was filed in June.
Okay.
And at the meeting I attended, the one regarding the abatements have been answered. It's a program
great.
for senior citizens for real estate tax relief, and it's done through a lottery system. So I'm fine with that as complied with right now also. So,
And
yeah.
And one more quick question, and just so I have a better understanding of the water source, where we get our source from. It goes through the Ty-Carmody. Is McLean and Ashley being utilized? Does it go through there and then to the city? So Ashley and McLean are both active water sources?
McLean is very active,
Okay.
is absolutely a part of the system. Ashley is not online at this point. It's emergency
Backup?
reserve. But it's as important as McLean
Okay,
in terms of being part of the system, yeah.
okay.
And just so that, for the public, Ashley is how many millions of gallons?
800 million,
800 million. Whiting's how many?
500, I think it's 479 million. It varies depending on the flash boards, but 479 without the flash boards.
Okay.
You're talking about the impound,
The amount you're talking about, right? Or the yield?
the yield.
Whiting Street, what's,
Total
The
capacity,
the
like?
capacity, or the impound is 479 million gallons. The yield is 1.5 million gallons.
1.5?
Ashley Reservoir is, I think it's 803 million gallons, and it has a yield of 2 million gallons a day. McLean Reservoir is 380 million gallons, has a yield of 500,000 gallons a day. And Ty-Carmody Reservoir is 4.8 billion gallons and has a yield of 13 million gallons a day. And just to put that into perspective, it's 4.8 billion. Quabbin Reservoir is 405
Billion, yeah.
So it's almost 100 times bigger.
Yeah.
And their watershed is hundreds of thousands of acres. So they're able to get away with having all types of recreational activity.
reason, yeah.
So if there's a contamination, it probably wouldn't hit the actual intake for about a year or two. So, because it's so massive, so it's just as big as our reservoir is, it's still relatively small in comparison to some of these
So
other
they,
places.
so they flooded Dana, Enfield, Greenwich, and Prescott. So Massachusetts used to have 355 cities and towns, now we have 351, because the legislature flooded 4 towns.
Yeah.
Dana, Enfield, Greenwich, and Prescott. So there you go. Okay, so, and that's the Quabbin Reservoir. But that's good. See, but we get so many stats here from you guys. It's really, really great.
It is good.
So if I can just add one other thing about South Hadley, is that back the last time we had any really serious discussions about selling them water, going over the Muller Bridge, was back, and some will remember when there was conversation about diverting the Connecticut into Quabbin. I think Joe may remember. I don't know if you guys are old enough. You're just kids. At any rate, there
Thank you.
was
Thank you for that.
conversation because
You do know that Councilor Sullivan is older than I am.
well,
He doesn't have to go there. Thanks for what you said.
I'm not going to get into this. It's already a bee's nest. I'm older than both of you guys, so. At any rate, there was conversation about diverting the Connecticut into Quabbin, and that, the final decision was that before that could even be studied, the impacts of that Quabbin was going to have to, that all the pipelines going to Boston and down south had to be plugged. They had to do a test. They had to plug them all up and make sure there were no leaks on the system as it existed. And it took quite a while to do that, but once it was done, the Quabbin is now overflowing because of the leaks. So the whole conversation about diverting the Connecticut is over. But that's when we were having Quabbin was talking about, there's one pipe that comes west, and it supplies South Hadley. At that time, they were talking about cutting that pipe off. So that's when South Hadley got serious about talking about buying water from us. Since the Quabbin is now overflowing and that pipeline, it still exists, they stopped being interested. So that's where we are with South Hadley.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'll accept the motion on these.
Motion that the 2 orders have been complied with?
Second?
Okay, I think just under discussion, I think we can really thank the manager and Dave Connie and longtime Commissioner Mark Nador, Holyoke residents, obviously, and for all their work and stewardship in the city over all these decades. And then we have, I think we have maybe a foundation here, not a springboard, if not yet, but a little foundation to sort of see if we can move this forward ever so slightly. So thanks so much for your input. So on the motion, that's been complied, these orders been complied with, all in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you so much.
We want to thank you guys for all your help and support over the years. And glad to meet with anybody that wants some more information from us. We're glad to have them at our department or here. So thank you.
We'll see how happy everybody is after Wednesday's meeting.
Yeah. Wednesday's another story, yeah.
Yeah.
That's another topic. That's good.
Yeah. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
And let's see if we can find the correspondence from Ms. Zoeller. I don't have it in front of me. Let's see if Ryan put it here. I bet he did. Okay. All right, and if we could get, so I think the rest of this meeting can go really smoothly. See if we can get to it. Get a motion, take number 4 off the table, please.
I would take the number 4 off the table for discussion.
On the motion, take number 4 off the table, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Communication from Alicia Zoeller, our Community Development Department Head, Annual Plan Reprogramming 2 of Community Development Block Grant Fund. So on August 6th, she wrote us a letter to the City Council that we put on the 8-7 agenda. Due to changes in block grant funding activities, a substantial amendment to the 2017 annual plan is necessary. The Department of HUD requires that substantial amendments to annual plans be reviewed in a similar manner. Bids received for the following public facility improvement activities were higher than block grant allocations. An additional $320,000 is required to complete the activities. The reprogrammed funds will be taken from prior year activities that did not utilize their allocations. Proposed increases for each activity are shown below. Installation of games tables at Carlos Vega Park, $50,000. Installation of tables and benches at Sushi Park, $12,000. Installation of benches, exercise equipment, and surfacing at Pulaski Park, $93,000. Installation of a basketball court and associated amenities at Eli Park, $165,000. A joint public hearing was with the Citizens Advisory Committee was to be held August 28th. A 30-day public comment opened August 13th and closes September 14th. I respectfully request the City Council review these proposed amendments and make a recommendation to City Council. Well, she asked for a recommendation by September 4th, but due to timing, there was no way we could take this up until now. But we are taking it up. I really didn't have any comments, but we reached out to Ms. Zoeller. She had a prior commitment for tonight, but she was really wondering if there were any comments from this body relative to those 4 proposals. Councilor Sullivan.
Yep. Can I see the sheet?
Yes.
We've got parks already in the city that are not being maintained. Down in South Holyoke at the basketball and handball courts, there's monstrous cracks in the pavement, grass growing up in them. And to be spending $50,000 on game tables, on other exercise equipment that can only be used a few months a year, $93,000, $50,000, when we can't maintain what we have in place already. I just can't go along with it. I can't go along with it anymore. We've got in front of us now what we just talked about. $2 million facing us up at the reservoir. This is could be outdoor recreational activity also. There's just so much other better uses of these funds, and I can't go along with this kind of a diversion.
Any other comments on that from any other committee members or any other councilors present? Councilor Tallman.
Yeah, I can see his frustration, my colleague, but this money is needed because of the cost, and the reprogramming is money that was left over from the previous year. And my concern is if we don't utilize those funds from the previous year for certain projects, that it just goes back to the government. It just doesn't get spent. And I believe it did go through the Citizens Advisory Committee. I know we did our job early on, but this is reprogramming money. It happens every year to put money back into projects that in certain wards that need to be done. So I don't have an issue with this at all.
Yeah, and Mike, you were on the Citizens Advisory Committee. Was there a meeting on August 28th, and if so, what happened?
If there was, I didn't get the notice of it, or I didn't see the notice of it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd want to move this along. I would tend to agree with Councilor Sullivan on this. But I mean, I'm not going to vote to support these changes myself. But I think that they're kind of out of our hand. But so if seeing how there's 4 of us here. I didn't hear from Councilor Valentin, but I don't want to. I mean, I'd be of the opinion that we just say complied with and move it up to City Council. That would be my I mean, actually, nothing to comply, but just, the motion is just to receive it.
receive it.
Frankly, that's the motion to receive it, I think. Okay, so if I could just get that motion, and then we'll move it on to city council.
Motion to receive the communication from Alicia Zoeller.
Second.
On the motion to receive, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I really appreciate that, so let's just mark this if I may. And just so the committee knows, if I felt there was anything controversial here with this, Councilor McGivern is here, so under our rules, Councilor McGivern could sit at the table, but I don't think any of this, and he could be a tie-breaking vote, but I don't think there's anything controversial here, so, but we do have that flexibility, so if a committee member, if that ever happens in the future, and we only have 4, and a committee member says, Mr. Chair, per rule, whatever, we need the 5th member, then yes, I would do that. So I want you to, just be aware of that. I forgot the rule number, but we amended those rules last year. Okay, so just enough of that. Okay, so.
Make a motion to take up item number 5 for discussion.
On the motion, take number 5 off the table. All in favor? Aye. Okay, none opposed. This is from Councilor Bacon. The 2 2-acre parcels on Mountain Road adjacent to the conservation area be placed into conservation across from 315 Mountain Road in front of the old shooting range. And I did receive an email from Councilor Bacon. It's okay to table my order until a final report in September. And so I'm going to ask that we do table this, but what I'm going to do is forward to you an email from Mr. Smith. Andrew Smith is our Conservation Commissioner, does a wonderful job for the city. And he wrote a fairly lengthy email saying that basically that his commission needs a little more time, possibly to mid-September, when they would have a final risk assessment prepared. So I'm hoping, and we don't have it on, we'll set up a next meeting as agenda item 8 tonight. So I'm hopeful that we'll just table this to our next meeting.
Motion to table.
Second.
And I will forward this email. Don't let me forget to do that.
Okay.
If I forget to do it, just text me tomorrow and I'll forward. I meant to do it, but I forgot. On the motion table, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I really appreciate that as well. Table.
Take up item number 6 for discussion.
On the motion, take item number 6 off the table. All in favor?
Aye.
This is counseled by Mike Sullivan, that HRA and HEDIC meet with the committee to discuss the possibility and benefits of merging the 2 entities into one body. And we reached out to Marcos because it's his Office of Planning and Economic Development, and they really do a nice job for the city as well. And I always like to compliment Marcos and John Dijek and Jeff Burkott and the whole team in that part of City Hall Annex. Dear councilors, I would like to extend apologies to the committee, to the committee on behalf of the chairs of HRA and HEDIC, who were not available to be before you to address item number 6. Let's see. The chair has a conflict, and both chairs have one has a conflict and one is traveling, and he's providing this communication in the hopes that it will address the order. The City Office of Planning and Economic Development and legal staff have looked into the possibility of an HRA and HEDIC merger over the past few years as a way to streamline public sector operations and further activate HEDIC capital towards the urban renewal plan implementation actions. While we have an advanced understanding of the steps required, staff is also examining an alternative possibility of reinventing the HEDIC industrial loan program to meet niches of higher need, while also potentially injecting additional capital from HEDIC into HRA's urban renewal plan, all without requiring the merger of the bodies. We hope to have an advanced understanding of this potential path forward in the first quarter of 2019 in order to share our findings and recommendations with both boards. And, Councilor McGivern served ably on, Joe, how long have you been on the HEDIC board?
1991.
Wow, okay, wow, that's pretty cool. Thanks, Joe, for all, so Councilor McGivern has been serving as a city councilor since, oh boy, Joe, 88?
80.
80, okay, so he's been on the Board of Aldermen.
You started young though, Councilor Bartley.
You're still young. Board of Aldermen and the City Council since 1980, and Joe, you're in your 20th term?
I haven't thought about that. 39th year.
Okay, 20th term.
Yep.
So you're in your 20th term, and you've been on HEDIC since 1991 or 1990. That's great. Counselor, did you, before I turn it over to Mike, Counselor, did you want to weigh in on the HRA HEDIC mergers, or you just want to?
Well, real quick, because Mike did, talk with me before he filed the order, and this is nothing new. And it hasn't hit a roadblock, but it has slowed down. And I think this order is going to at least light the fire to get this discussion going again. I've stated it before, and I'll state it real quick. It's more complex than it looks because of the assets that HEDIC has built up over the years. HEDIC goes back to Bob Bateman's days, and of course Jeff, and now Marcus, and the office and the stuff that went through HEDIC has been pretty much successful in terms of having revolving accounts and assets that can be reused. We have helped out with the redevelopment authority. The redevelopment authority and HEDIC have two separate purposes. Not a lot of redundancy, but some overlapping in areas of where they can do their work. But at the same time, HEDIC kind of got a marching order indirectly from the state that we shouldn't be doing commercial development. We should only be doing industrial development, and that kind of in manufacturing kind of curtailed some of the projects that HEDIC had done in the past. But we've talked about a merger. We've talked about ways to. There's things that the redevelopment authority cannot accept unless the redevelopment authority is redesigned. I also, and I don't want to steal any of Mike's thunder, but I also think when we look at these two bodies, the way they're made up is a big difference. HEDIC has a lot more, although they're mayoral appointments, has a lot more connection locally in terms of the city council, in terms of the members, where when you look at the redevelopment authority, it has that local connection, but it also has a state connection with the governor. And I think that just the numbers themselves kind of speak for which body is more of a local flavor or certainly more local input.
Councilor Sullivan?
Yeah. Well, I filed this order back on September 5th of 2017. So it's been a year and 5 days, and the HEDIC, HRA, and our Director of Economic Development have been aware of this for over a year. And the letter they put together is dated today. It contains some of my favorite phrases. Look into the possibility. An alternative possibly. We hope to have. The city is beyond, hope is not a strategy, all right? When I've addressed some of this stuff before with other members of the board, they're waiting for someone to come to them with a project. We need to get out there and solicit projects. We need to go out and bring industry back to the city. We have a really valuable toolbox in HEDIC, and we have a broken city, and we're not using the tools. We're not utilizing what we have. And that's my frustration with it. And this letter only further intensifies that frustration. They say, looking into the possibility over the past few years, I believe this has been going on more than a few years. I believe this possibility has been going on since before I was on this council. I've been on 3 years now. As I understand it, it might even go back 6 or 8 years, almost to the formation of Redevelopment Authority. And the Redevelopment Authority, as Councilor McGivern pointed out, has the state connection, but they have no assets. HEDIC is sitting on all the assets, the financial tools that we need, and we'll hear more about some of the things that possibly HEDIC could get involved in, and maybe there's a chance for some action here with what we're going to see on Wednesday night When we hear from our water department what's needed infrastructure-wise in the city, infrastructure that's also going to be vital for anybody that wants to do any industrial development in the city. So that's what I have to say about it.
Well, it looks like, though you filed it a year and a day, 5 days ago, looks like you're gonna have to wait about another 4 or 5 months to get an answer. So I think the best thing we can do, well, you know what, we do have a comment about us down the future. I mean, the only way we're gonna get this expressed to the full city council, Mike, is to say complied with and then move it on to city council. So I think you should probably refile something after a conversation with Marcos.
Oh, do we want to,
I mean,
as far as I'm concerned, it's not complied with. We asked them to come in here, right? The request for them to come in here was made over a year ago.
Well,
And they haven't come in. They send a letter today.
Well, let's see.
I would just leave it tabled, and
All right.
maybe they can find it, in their schedules to get in here someday.
No, you're the maker of the order, then.
I'll make a
Sure,
motion.
if I could just add 2 comments, I'll be real quick.
Councilman Gabbard?
One thing is, just to remind everyone, HEDIC cannot act on a project on its own. There has to be an economic development plan presented both by the mayor and approved by the city council to allow HEDIC to do something. Some ongoing things that HEDIC is doing there's not much left, is still trying to market some land that the gas and electric had taken in had part of the, when the gas and electric bought the dam from, at the time, Northeast Utilities. And also the revolving loan account, which has been very successful. However, it's not just the city council that's not upset, but concerned about this moving so slow. The HEDIC body has talked to remember now, Marcus and staff are not, appointments of HEDIC or the redevelopment authority, they're appointments of the mayor. And they have their own job besides working with redevelopment authority and working with HEDIC. And sometimes they're spread thin on other projects that the mayor has them doing. But we want answers too, because HEDIC can make some moves on their own, but we've asked the law department for legal advice as to what can, we turn over to the redevelopment authority. And we also have a concern that, should we be turning everything over to the redevelopment authority without input from HEDIC, who has nurtured these projects and nurtured these assets for so many years? So I'd like to see not just Marcus and the chairs in, but I think we should invite the mayor in too, because the mayor appoints both of these bodies. And I think we should have a roundtable discussion on, let's go. We got to figure out a way to better utilize all that we have in front of us. And I agree with Mike. We've had a couple of sessions, with staff. HEDIC bodies had a couple sessions saying, we need a project. We need something we can sink our teeth into. And I understand it puts more work on them, and they're concentrating what the redevelopment authority is doing, but it's time. There's other things we can be doing. And I also said, we haven't had a request for a loan. Our loans are capped very, they're not a lot, but we're a third entity loan. When we loan someone wants to buy $1 million machine, we can give them up to $100,000 to help them go to another financial institute or maybe 2 financial institutes to get the loan that they need. We're third party. If we don't, if it's not successful, there's a good chance HEDIC won't get the money back, but we're instrumental in helping someone that otherwise had no recourse to go to a lending authority. And Mike, I lost it. Mike, credit union.
Mike Murphy?
Mike Murphy. Sorry, Mike. He was very adamant about that, because that's the way we always did it. And he said, no, that's the way it should be done. And the larger institutions appreciate that because, we're helping out and they know that, we're giving something with a much higher risk, to get someone in position to take a loan. But this is an important order, and I hope we can get them in, or whichever way you want to do it. I hope we can get some answers in the near future.
Sullivan?
Just a question, Joe. I'm trying to remember from the budget process, doesn't HEDIC also give money each year to the, support the budget of the Office of Economic?
We do, and that's a sore subject with me, but I'll be glad to explain it.
Yeah.
Until somewhere in the 1990s, we paid for the staff that HEDIC used, which was a full person. The titles have changed over the years, and a percentage of staff and a percentage of supplies and stuff like that, all up and legit. When the city hit some very difficult financial times, HEDIC supplemented that office to one point where we were paying over 50% of that budget itself. With Kevin, when Kevin was our president and Todd, I think, was on the finance, we recently, I think we're in our third budget, show that in the city budget now because of what, we used to be just a footnote. Now we show what HEDIC is paying for and what the taxpayers are paying for. HEDIC's not doing it reluctantly, but we also know that that creates a structural deficit in the HEDIC budget if we keep paying for things that, we don't have money coming back in terms of projects.
And how much did we use this year?
I didn't bring the numbers with me because I thought Marcus and our chairman would be here, but if you look in your budget, it's pretty much defined as to, it's a number now. It's no longer geared towards a body or a position. It's just a flat percentage of the budget. I'll get it for you, but I don't have it right in front of me.
All right. I think the number was like $50,000 or $70,000. It was a pretty significant sum of cash, right?
It is, yes.
So the only point I'm making is it didn't go towards bringing new industry into town or helping develop any business or putting business loans out. It's supporting salaries and staff at City Hall.
It's a good point, but it indirectly does go towards the economic development and planning. It's just, what we're doing is using an asset that we should be replacing through projects that bring money back. Because we don't charge a lot for revolving loans, but we charge the prime rate, the lowest we can.
I get it, Joe. The only point I'm making is I wonder how much of that is of that effort is going towards industrial development, which is the charter of HEDIC.
Of HEDIC.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I agree.
Well, if, it sounds like we're gonna table this, Mike, I hope you, between now and when we take it, maybe we can take it up again in a couple months. You can have a conversation with Marcos and we'll plan it so he can come in here, so. If I could get a motion, please?
Motion to table?
On the motion to table, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that's tabled until, all right, so,
Motion to take up item number 7 for discussion.
thank you. On the motion to take number 7 off the table for discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, this is filed by Juan Anderson Burgos, and it's the Mass DOT come into the committee to discuss traffic options on Dillon, Dwight, and Northampton Street. I'm not sure if Mass DOT has much to do with Dillon, but certainly Dwight and Northampton. I did speak with Councilor Anderson Burgos at the City Council meeting to ask him to reach out to Mass DOT. I don't think he's not here. So we took this up, I think, out of respect and courtesy to the councilor. We should leave this in committee for now. We should, I will say that it's very likely that we'll have Mass DOT come back here, not in this committee, but in this room. They want to chair their own meeting, and they want to give an update on Route 141, which, boy, there's just a lot of movement on that project too, and so hopefully they'll come in the near term and give us an update on 141 and all those proposals, and maybe at that time they might be able to tell us what their perspective is on Northampton and Dwight. But I think we should just table this for now.
Motion to table item number 7.
All right, thanks, sir. On the motion to table, all in favor?
Aye.
I really appreciate that. And then that brings us to the end of our agenda, but we do have one other thing that we didn't list, which is what I kind of like to add. I didn't get a chance to put this on the agenda just for our next meeting. So I don't have anything in particular that's pressing, but I know these things come up, and I do like us to meet once a month, if possible. So I'm looking at the 15th of October. Is that a possibility for everyone's calendar?
What night is it? Is it a Monday, Wednesday, or?
I like the Mondays, Pete.
You like the Monday? Okay, 'cause
Yeah.
I know with finance, we were doing Mondays, and now we're sort
I-
of switched to Wednesdays, so I don't know if that's,
Yeah, he did. Joe switched to Wednesdays. I really appreciate that. I kind of like the Mondays. You know, the 8th is the holiday, so that's not going to happen. And that would be the one I would look to. And I think the 1st, I think is too soon. I don't really think there's going to be anything coming. So the 15th or the 22nd, to me, are really good dates. So,
15th is already me.
okay. Counselor Valentin, okay? Counselor Sullivan?
That's fine.
6:30?
Oh, that's for you, Pete.
What, or 6 o'clock? I'm retired now, so I don't know if anybody can get here earlier. I don't know. Some people still work.
Would you rather do 6 o'clock?
Yep.
I would too.
I can do 6.
Especially when it's dark.
Yeah, I can do
Instead of
6.
getting out of here,
6 would be good.
oh, I really appreciate the,
Yeah.
wow, this is, okay, so next meeting will be 10:15 at 6 PM. And that's that, so one more motion.
Motion to adjourn? Second?
On the motion to adjourn, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody, really appreciate it.